In the last 4 chapters, chapters 7 through 10, I shared with you my neurobiology of change presentation, the one I've used for over 7 years in some form to teach my clients about the brain. The basic slides in the presentation have remained pretty much the same since its inception in 2008, but the ideas behind CAVP have evolved a bit along the way. So if you'll allow me to digress a bit, I want to go back in time and capture some ideas and events that have happened along the way. So let's first move back to my graduate school days. 2 things occurred that would ultimately change the way that I do therapy. The first one was kind of an accidental, serendipitous, experimental discovery. When I was in grad school, I was working full-time with a home restoration company that my neighbor owned. The job that I had previously on the psychiatric unit of a local hospital was not willing to accommodate my graduate school schedule, although ironically, the 2 doctors that I worked most closely with on that unit were the ones who encouraged me to pursue my master's. Go figure. And thus, I had approached my neighbor to see if I could possibly work with him as a contractor to do some drywall and some painting. Now, he was more than willing to work with my school schedule, so we struck a deal. Drywalling, sanding, painting, these can be pretty tedious and mind-numbing activities. I literally had hours on end doing things I really didn't have to think about. And often I was all by myself on the project. Now, since my wife and I had 6 kids between us to feed, clothe, transport to school, and any sporting events, my time was definitely pinched a bit. Finding time to study was often a bit tricky. And one day, while I was doing my mind-numbing painting and thinking about the fact that I still had 2 to 3 hours of studying to do later that evening, after kid duty, of course, it dawned on me that I could study on the job if I put my notes on tape. So I bought a small recorder and gave it a try. I soon discovered that I could read all of my notes onto an audio tape and then listen to that while I went about my work. Not only was it an effective way to study, it really kicked butt over simply reading my notes. There was something strangely powerful about the process of speaking my notes into a tape recorder and then listening to them in my own voice. It felt like I was learning the material 10 times faster than I ever did before. What started out as just a way to make better use of my time quickly became my favorite way to study. Even when I did have more time, I would still put the information on tape and listen. Sometimes I would even go off on a long bike ride with my earbuds in, just to study for a test. I cut my studying time by at least 50%, and I was acing every test on top of it. I even began writing and editing papers by speaking them into my tape recorder first. Little did I know at the time how this was going to inform my methods of therapy years later. Now, the second event was called practicum. My second year in grad school was all about practicum, learning how to do therapy in a quasi-laboratory setting called the Practicum Clinic. Indiana University School of Education in Fort Wayne operated an actual counseling clinic where grad students practiced their therapy on real live volunteer clients from the community. Clients receive free counseling from graduate students in exchange for being willing to be observed by the practicum professor and videotaped in session to later be discussed by the cohort. Each and every session we did was recorded on video, which was then used by students to watch and critique our own performance. It was here that I learned firsthand just how powerful of a tool videotaping is for learning and improving. I could observe not only my speech, but my body language, my movements, my posture, everything. Now, naturally, everyone was totally freaked out by seeing themselves on tape at first. But, as predicted by our professor, after about a month in, you practically forgot all about the fact that you were being taped. And the initial tendency to focus on how weird you looked or how much fatter you appeared on tape was soon forgotten. as you focused on what you were saying and how you were communicating with clients. When I jumped into the texting revolution in 2008, with my fancy slide-out full keyboard, now referred to as a dumb phone, I soon found out how handy this whole texting thing really was. Not only was it great for communicating with my clients, but it was great for communicating with myself. If I needed to remind myself of something, I could just text it to myself. If I wanted to send that text to my email, I could do that as well. Suddenly, my journaling took on a whole new flavor. I could journal my ideas wherever and whenever I wanted to, and then send them right to my email inbox. I reasoned that many of my clients would forget to bring their journals back with them, as they did. But they never forgot their phones. So I started to teach my clients to journal ideas in their cell phones and showed them how to put their email addresses in as a contact and send their journal entries right to their email inbox. I dubbed this practice Jexting, journaling and texting. Dumb name maybe, but it worked like a charm and it stuck. In one fell swoop, I had improved the likelihood that my clients would actually journal by a quantum leap. To this day, some of my older clients still refer to Jexting, which just makes me smile. Then one day, I was playing around with my old dumb phone and found out that I could record my own voice under sounds in the menu and then play that back as a ringtone. But, of course, instead of using it as a ringtone, I began making 30-second sound bites of information to play back to myself while I was riding in the car. Just as I had discovered in grad school, listening to my own voice was a powerful way to retain ideas. Now, the ideas were not class notes, but life notes. Notes like, stay in the moment, think positive, give it everything you've got, every moment, all day. Control what you can, forget about the rest. Do the things today that others won't do, so that tomorrow you can do the things that others can't do. This quickly became my ritual. I would voice record these quotes and ideas in my phone and then play them back to myself every morning on my way to work. It was like having my own personal pep talk every morning from the greatest self-help guru in the world, me. It was amazing. It was my own personal time to concentrate and to meditate on my very own custom set of mantras. Now, I had tried meditation in the past and failed miserably at it because I just couldn't stay focused to some dude with a buttery smooth voice telling me to focus on my breathing. But I sure as heck could stay highly focused on my own voice telling me things that I had already predetermined were the most important things that I could be thinking about in that moment. I didn't equate the experience with meditation back then, but looking back, that's exactly what it was and still is for me to this very day, straight up meditation. This too, I began teaching to my clients. Again, it could be done with a video cassette recorder or a digital recorder, but that requires an extra device. And just like a journaling notebook, these devices tend to get left behind, but cell phones don't. With the plethora of different cell phones on the market, it wasn't always the easiest thing to accomplish, but those that I could get to give it a try reported a phenomenal difference in mood as they listened to themselves talking about the ideas and concepts that they really wanted to focus on. It was as if listening to the powerful custom-made mantras created a better filter through which to see the world. For the next 4 years, I continued to experiment, to develop and teach different ways to use the cell phone to replace the traditional journal that most therapists want their clients to use. But again, I wasn't having them journal their thoughts as they existed in their heads, but rather to journal the corrected thoughts as a means of creating a preferred way of thinking, a brand new perspective. By having this new perspective recorded in text and on audio tape on one's phone, it could be read and or listened to literally anywhere someone had a few free minutes and a set of earbuds. My goal is to break down any barriers that people naturally have to doing something new or different. The more steps one has to take to actually make something happen, the less likely that it's going to happen. If I have to find my journal, sit down, and write in it for an hour sometime during the day, that represents a pretty low likelihood of happening. But if that same information is on my phone and I can simply pull it out of my pocket, hit play, and listen for a minute, I have just increased the likelihood by at least 50%, possibly as high as 70%, that it's actually going to happen. And the cool thing is that the brain is designed to listen intently on audio tape of one's own voice. It's at least 10 times more powerful in terms of synapse activation. This means literally that 1 minute can accomplish virtually the same amount of practice as 10 minutes of journaling. Or 6 minutes of listening accomplishes the same as 1 hour of sitting down and journaling. This is some pretty powerful stuff.